Hello, dear friends. Today is August 26, 2025, and I present to you another overview of the battlefield map. At the moment, we are receiving a huge number of reports from almost the entire front line. However, it is not possible to record changes everywhere, since the volume of information is truly massive, and it is not always possible to immediately reflect everything on the map. In the coming days, all relevant data will be added, and I will describe and show all the updates in detail in this video. But before we begin, as always, I want to sincerely ask you to subscribe to the channel. Your subscription provides tremendous support for its growth. If you have watched my videos before and are not yet subscribed, please do so. Many thanks to everyone who has already supported the channel. Now let's move on to the Zaporizhzhia direction. First, let's look at the borders of the Zaporizhzhia region. As of today, part of its territory remains under the control of the Ukrainian armed forces, while the southern part is fully controlled by Russian troops. Reports are coming in that the Russian army continues assault operations near Stepnohirsk as well as the settlement of Plavny. Intense fighting is ongoing in Plavny. Russian forces are attempting to gain a foothold on the southern outskirts of Stepnohirsk and advance toward the residential district located there. Let me remind you that this district has high-rise buildings, where Russian forces had previously managed to establish positions. At first, they occupied one building, then another in the Aegis south, as well as a local educational institution. However, later Ukrainian forces brought in reserves, carried out a counterattack, and pushed the enemy out. Currently, the district is once again under Ukrainian control, but Russian troops continue attempts to break through and are advancing into the southern part of Stepnohirsk. As for the actions of the Ukrainian armed forces, they are striking Russian positions near Kamensk. Let me remind you that Kamensk has long been under Russian control, but despite this, Russian forces continue expanding their zone of control while repelling Ukrainian attacks. Just a few days ago, Russian units secured new areas, advancing by about 2 kilometers. However, their positions come under daily attacks from Ukrainian FPV drones and infantry. Otherwise, the map in this area remains unchanged, but it can be stated that progress has been made in Plavny, and further expansion of the control zone is expected soon. In the areas of Stepov, Mali Shcherbaki and Shcherbaki, active FPV duels are taking place between the two sides. The Ukrainian army is attacking Russian positions, while Russian forces are fighting around Pavlivka. The situation here remains largely unchanged. A similar picture is observed in Mala Tokmachka. Ukrainian forces are counter-attacking toward Novopokrovka, while fierce battles are underway near Bilohirya and Mala Tokmachka itself, where Russian troops are trying to advance. Next, the Huliapol direction. According to some reports, Russian forces have captured Olhivska and launched an offensive on Poltavka from the direction of Malinivka and Olhivsky itself. However, so far this information has not been confirmed. Yesterday, we also discussed the possibility of Olhivska coming under Russian control, but official confirmations are still lacking. Perhaps data will appear during this recording. If you have verified information, please share it in the comments. I remind you that changes are only added to the map after reliable confirmation, whether through video evidence or official statements from either side. For now, the situation in this sector remains the same. Let's move on to the border of the Zaporizhzhia, Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk regions. Today, reports emerged that Russian forces have taken the settlement of Zaporizhzhia and are advancing toward Novomykolaivka. Earlier, there had already been reports of attacks on these settlements, and now pro-Russian sources claim that Zaporizhzhia has come under Russian control. A similar situation occurred with Novohrihorivka. First came reports, then video confirmation, after which the changes were added to the map. It is possible that in the coming days, footage of a Russian flag being raised in Zaporizhzhia will appear as well. In addition, it is reported that the front line has leveled out between Novohrihorivka and Novopol, and this entire pocket has fallen under Russian control. There are also reports of Russian troops entering the southern outskirts of Kamyshevaka. Earlier, there had already been unconfirmed reports of them consolidating there. Most likely, evidence will surface soon, and then the map will be updated. Everything points to the likelihood that active assaults on Kamyshevaka will begin in the coming days. It is located in Donetsk region, under Ukrainian control, but Russia will undoubtedly seek to capture it and move further. A similar situation is unfolding near Andriivka, Klevtsova, Oleksandriyhrad, and adjacent areas. As for Ivanivka, there are still no confirmations of Russian troops entering, although earlier reports claimed they crossed the river and occupied the southern part of the settlement. No reliable materials have surfaced yet. The settlement of Filia, on the other hand, has fully come under Russian control, and clearing operations are underway in the surrounding area. It is also reported that Russian forces advanced up to 2 kilometers deep there. In the area of Udakne, positional battles continue. Yesterday we discussed fighting on the northern and western outskirts of the settlement. According to unverified reports, Udakne has effectively fallen under Russian control, with clearance operations and expansion of the controlled zone underway. Confirmations are expected in the coming days. A similar situation is observed in Kotlin, where positional clashes are taking place on the northern outskirts. Now let's turn to Mirnohrad. As before, after massive air bombardments, assault actions began. It is reported that Russian forces entered the northern outskirts of Mirnohrad and also expanded control in Krasny Lyman, although confirmations are not yet available. Yesterday, a video from this area showed an advance of about 2 kilometers. Likely, new materials will appear in the coming days and the map will be updated. Even now, it is safe to say that Russian control here is broader than officially marked. Heavy fighting also continues in the area of Rodinske. Despite Ukrainian claims of full control over this settlement, we have repeatedly received reports of Russian forces consolidating on its eastern outskirts. According to pro-Russian sources, most of Rodinske is already under Russian control, and the supply route to Pokrovsk has been cut. However, these reports are not entirely accurate, just as Ukrainian ones are not. The situation remains highly contested, and the battles continue. A similar picture is unfolding near Krasny Lyman, where assaults are also taking place. There are no reliable data yet regarding Volodymyrivka. Reports claim it has been captured by Russian forces and that an advance on Kharkov has begun, but these remain too doubtful. Nonetheless, overall Russian progress in this sector can be noted. I remind you that map updates are not made instantly, since any information requires careful verification. Both Ukraine and Russia produce a large number of false claims. Therefore, all incoming data must be treated with maximum caution. Now regarding the settlement of Rusin Yar. Yesterday, a number of Russian sources reported that this settlement had completely come under Russian control. However, it is important to stress, so far, no confirming evidence has appeared. It is possible that by the time of recording or release of this material, new information will surface online, but as of now, no reliable confirmation exists. As for the situation in the pocket located between Poltavka and Rusin Yar, no detailed updates have yet been received from this part of the front. At the same time, pro-Russian channels are spreading information that intense battles are taking place near the settlements of Yablunivka, Katarinivka, Sherbinivka, and Klebanbyk. Earlier, reports already appeared claiming that Katarinivka had supposedly fully come under Russian control. In addition, the Russian Ministry of Defense officially stated that Klebanbyk is under the control of the Russian armed forces. But if we take these claims as fact, then the question arises, how can we then speak of ongoing heavy battles in Katarinivka or Sherbinivka? It is logical to assume that if Katarinivka and Klebanbyk are indeed fully occupied by Russian units, then the area should be cleared and Ukrainian forces cut off. In such a case, there cannot be positional fighting. From this, we can conclude that most likely Russian control over Katarinivka is not absolute, and Klebanbyk may in fact be in a so-called grey zone, where battles are ongoing and the final front line has not yet been established. The same applies to Sherbinivka. Most likely the clearing of this settlement has not yet been completed, and it is precisely there that clashes are recorded, since Ukrainian forces must maintain supply lines. If supply is completely cut off, then it would be more accurate to speak not of battles, but of mopping up the remaining pockets of resistance. It is noteworthy that most of the questionable reports about fighting in Katarinivka and Sherbinivka are coming specifically from Russian sources, which makes the situation even more confusing. Therefore, we can only wait for new video materials or official confirmations in order to objectively reflect the changes on the map. For now, the Russian Ministry of Defense continues to insist that both settlements are under the control of Russian forces. In addition, active hostilities are taking place near the settlement of Oleksandr Shultin. Yesterday, video footage was published confirming that the forward positions of Russian units were located there. Despite reports of counterattacks by the Ukrainian armed forces, all territory marked in red came under Russian control over the past 24 hours. As of yesterday, the advance amounted to about 500 meters. It is possible that by the time of this recording, the control zone is already much wider. Now let's move on to the Siversk direction. Here, the front line is generally in a pause. According to some reports, the settlement of Serebryanka is not yet fully under Russian control. However, Russian sources often claim that Serebryanka is entirely occupied. Supporting these claims are video materials from various outskirts showing Russian positions, which is why the map is shaded in their favor. Nevertheless, even some pro-Russian channels point out that this information may be inaccurate, which makes the situation extremely ambiguous. I draw attention to the fact that these are not Ukrainian claims, but data from a portion of Russian sources. Moreover, recently there have been reports that in the area of Hryhorivka, Russian forces came under attack from Ukrainian troops. Thus, until the Ukrainian side provides evidence in the form of video or other convincing proof, the settlement of Serebryanka remains marked as controlled by Russian forces. Additionally, it is reported that Russian troops are carrying out clearance operations in the Serebryanka forest, and according to some data, most of it is already under their control. Today, news also arrived about the clearing of a pocket in this area. Since the supply of Ukrainian units is difficult and the terrain is swampy and impassable, reports suggest that the Ukrainian armed forces are effectively deprived of the ability to receive reinforcements. In the morning, there were claims of positional battles here, but everything indicates that Russian troops are gradually clearing the territory while simultaneously conducting demining. As for the settlements of Zarekny and Torsky, according to some reports, Russian forces have secured the southern outskirts, while from the northern side there are no updates, apart from information about strikes on Ukrainian positions using FPV drones. Overall, there are no significant changes in this sector for now. Now to the Krasny-Lyman direction. Positional fighting continues here. Earlier, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced that the settlement of Seredny had come under Russian control, but this information has not yet been confirmed. Heavy clashes are recorded near Karpivka, and Ukrainian positions in Andriivka, Olhivka, as well as north of Hrekivka, are under attack. If we look at the borderline of the Donetsk region, it currently appears as follows. Part of the Luhansk region, as well as a small portion of the Serebryanka forest, still remain under the control of the Ukrainian armed forces. However, clearance operations are likely to be completed here in the coming days. Thus, only two separate fragments of territory remain under Ukrainian control. Let's move on to the Kupiansk direction. Reports from here indicate that Russian forces have begun storming Kupiansk. On the map, a significant part of the area is already marked as under Russian control. It is reported that the settlement of Moskovka is practically fully occupied by Russian forces. They have also consolidated on the northern outskirts of Sobolivka and established fire control over Kupiansk's supply road. Currently, Russian forces are advancing on the city from several directions. Reports indicate that tank units and assault groups are actively operating in this area. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian army is forced to supply its troops through Osinov, where Russian aviation is actively engaged. All this suggests that major changes to the front line may occur in the coming days. The situation here resembles what is happening on the Pokrovsk front. Russian reconnaissance and sabotage groups have already been spotted in central Kupiansk. This indicates that the supply road may be physically cut off, and once it is blocked, Russian forces will have the opportunity to completely sever the remaining roads, encircle the Ukrainian grouping, and launch a full-scale assault on the city. Let me remind you that Kupiansk is the main supply hub for the entire Ukrainian grouping in this part of the front. If the road is cut, Ukrainian forces will find themselves in a semi-encirclement. An important factor is the Oskil River, which flows through this area and cannot be used for supply. Now to the Vovchansk direction. Despite numerous viewer requests for reviews, There is actually nothing new to show here. For several months, the front line has remained unchanged. The main hostilities come down to clashes between Russian and Ukrainian FPV drones, as well as assault units. Russian forces maintain a buffer zone, preventing Ukrainian advances toward Belgorod. The situation is similar in the Lipsty area. Neither the Ukrainian nor the Russian side is recording advances. As soon as reliable information appears about movement by either side, all changes will be added to the map and covered in detail. Now to the Sumy direction. So far, there are no major changes here. Russian sources report that clearance operations continue in Unakivka. The Ukrainian armed forces are actively bringing in reserves, some of which are destroyed by Russian FPV groups before they even arrive. Despite this, Ukrainian forces continue counterattacks, trying to hold the settlement. At present, most of Unakivka is controlled by Russian forces, who are clearing the surrounding areas and expanding their zone of control. Russian units are also attacking Ukrainian positions in the forests east of Sadki, where daily airstrikes and FPV drone attacks are recorded. In addition, reports indicate that Ukrainian units attempted counterattacks in the direction of Alexeyevka, trying to cut the supply road. However, they did not succeed. Let me remind you that the main supply road in this area runs through Nova Mykolaiivka, and it plays a key role. So far, no major changes have occurred here. The situation around the settlement of Besalavka remains disputed. The last confirmed video from Russian forces showed the raising of the Russian flag in this area. The advance amounted to about 1 kilometer deep into the front line. Thus, the settlement is currently marked as under Russian control. If the Ukrainian side provides its own confirmations, the map will be corrected. That's all the main news for today. Thank you for your attention, and let me remind you, subscribing to the channel really helps its development. See you next time.